Welcome back to Sikistan. Today we're going to talk about careers in sports, particularly careers in sports science. Definitely at this time of year, we tend to get a lot more questions about careers in sport and exercise science. We get careers in coaching. We get more and more emails as we kind of come up towards final exams for people in secondary school, high school, whatever you call it yourself. I decided to make this video just to clear it up for some people, give some people some ideas of the options that are out there, and just have a kind of realistic chat about what a career in sport looks like, or what some of the different options are for people. Definitely it's something that like is a massively growing industry. I do think that a career in sports science though has to be a small bit more, or you have to be a small bit more informed before you jump into it, than a kind of a more classical career path. So obviously, if you went down a career in chemistry, you'd probably work in an industry directly related to that. One thing that a kind of sports science degree or a sport and exercise science degree will give you, or a degree in kinesiology will give you, is it'll give you very good foundations for where you might want to go, but it's probably not going to bring you all the way. So my own background, as most of you who watch the channel will know, I have an undergrad in sport and exercise science. I then went on to do a master's degree afterwards. Before I ever went into the undergraduate course, though, I had a fair bit of experience in sport. I'd obviously played sport for a very long time, but then I was working part-time for like a tag rugby company, so directly involved in sports management, and particularly a very important part of sport, which is like paid business to customer coaching, or paid business to customer service providing. So for a lot of people now who are involved in sports science, going through degrees in sport and exercise science, you're not going to be working with the national governing body. You won't be working directly with athletes, but what you're working with most of the time is an amateur population, a population of people who are paying for their own coaching or their own scientific information. And so this idea of management, this idea of kind of how to run a business becomes very, very important. Aside from this kind of direct experience I had with management, I also had a direct experience with a lot of unpaid time in internship roles. So I'd started coaching a couple of years before I went into studying sports science. So I had a lot of experience in the kind of coaching realms, to such a point where in like my first year in university, most of the kind of lab-based stuff we were doing around coaching science, around direct S&C work, that would have been all stuff that I'd be very, very well qualified to teach at that point. So a lot of what you're going to gain in one of these kind of programs, in one of these specific sports science or exercise science courses, you really make your own gravy. Like if you're going out and you're doing courses like UKSCA workshops or getting NSCA approval as a coach, you're really going to be pushing yourself in a great direction to get a slightly better career path afterwards. This definitely isn't one of those degrees where you can go in and it's like a physiotherapy undergrad, where basically you go in as a green, untrained person and you come out as a fully qualified, or you then have the ability to be chartered immediately after you come out. With these kind of courses, it very much is about the other things that are on your CV. If you're going for a job in professional sport, or some of the jobs we'll talk about later on, you really do need a lot of other experience. You probably need multiple other qualifications aside from just your degree. So what kind of other areas can you get into with a sports science degree? For me, there's probably three main areas that sports scientists or exercise scientists seek gainful employment. The first of these obviously is in an academic setting. So you remain in college, you remain in university, you do your own research, you teach for some of the time, and then you're doing like a further master's, further PhD. You might just be doing a PhD so you can then become a lecturer, or you can just stay within that system and kind of perpetually research, teach, research, teach, research, teach. That's what a lot of people are aiming to do when they go into the exercise science kind of realm. You might also need to do a further undergraduate degree. So a lot of people will come in hoping to get into the kind of medical field. They might be hoping to get into the applied psychology fields. And for a lot of those courses, you're going to do an undergraduate degree in exercise science or kinesiology, and then you will go and you will start your undergraduate degree in whatever one of those courses it is. The next place you will see sports scientists getting employment is in industry. So this is working with biomechanics, working in the medical field or medical devices field. You could also be working in public health, or you could be working with product development with different companies. So if you look at any of the major sporting brands, they will have a certain amount of exercise science staff. They'll have a certain amount of biomechanical specialists on staff. This is very much one of the niche areas, and it isn't something that most exercise science classes or graduating classes, they might have 1% or they might have 0.5% of their total graduates going into this area. It's certainly a very, very interesting area. It's certainly an area you should be aware of if you're seeking employment, is that a lot of these companies are looking for exercise scientists, but it's certainly not something you could kind of bank your career path on. Where we see most exercise science students going once they finish their undergraduate degree is into applied fields. So this will be working with sports governing bodies, working in professional sport as those previous roles. You could be a direct exercise scientist, you could be a sports scientist. This would be things like running force plates in a gym when players are training, when players are getting certain amounts of data collected on them. They might also be running GPS units. If you see most professional field sports teams playing, they'll always have a GPS unit mounted just in between their shoulder blades. All of that kind of data is collected by sports scientists. Also, you have a lot of data being collected in gym and S&C sessions, not just in your sport-specific sessions. Then when you look at like further areas where professional sport might be looking for sports scientists, certainly in talent ID, when they're kind of vetting future players, when you're doing things like the combine days, all of that data gets collected by the exercise scientists, and it's certainly an area where a large amount of people are hired. But it's very important to note that these are incredibly competitive roles to get into. If you're looking to get into one of these areas, if you look to work in professional sport, particularly where we are in Europe, it's going to be highly, highly competitive. So you have a lot of commonality between the sport and exercise science programs across most of Europe. So you basically get a place where Munster Rugby will advertise a job. You'll then have people applying from all over the world to come and work there with that professional sports club. It's just the nature of it. There's a very, very small amount of these jobs out there, and the people who tend to be applying for them are really, really highly qualified. So a lot of time people will talk about grades not mattering too much and just getting the pass is what you really need to do. Certainly if you want to work in professional sports, the end number on your degree matters, for honours versus just a pass, a 4.0 versus a 3.8 versus a 3.0. All of these things are very, very important when you're going for those professional sports jobs. The other thing is that is literally the pinnacle of what a lot of people will view sport and exercise science to be. They'll want to be working with those really high level athletes, and so the amount of applicants is massive. The last kind of area, and this is probably the most common area where exercise science students will be employed, is in, you could call it like B2C service providing. So you have athletes who are paying for their own coaching, right? So you might be working in a direct coaching role. So you might be working in strength and conditioning. You might be working in very specialized area of strength work, power work, speed work, conditioning work, and you might have a sport and exercise science degree as kind of your base or your foundation for all of that. You'll also see people owning and running gyms. You'll see people working as personal trainers. A lot of these people, or most of these people now in the kind of the newer age of personal training, will have some sort of like level 8 college degree, a bachelor's degree in exercise science, sports science, or one of those. The important thing that I'd like to link back to now, though, is that when you have these degrees, it's the other stuff I spoke about earlier really makes the difference. It's the internships, it's the amount of experience you have, it's the amount of hours, weeks, years in front of people, coaching people, that actually makes a difference in this particular area. There's a lot of areas like industry, like professional sports, where the the particular studies you do when you're in university, the particular areas of specialization you might do in your undergraduate degree, your grades in your undergraduate degree, your references, all of those things will matter a lot. When you get into the direct consumer market, it is very, very different. It tends to be your overall experience level. It might be something as simple as your presence online will make a massive difference to you being a very successful sport and exercise scientist, or somebody who can't quite get their feet off the ground in a personal training environment. So do I think it's a good career for a lot of people to get into? Absolutely. If you enjoy sport, if you enjoy working with people, if you have a very, very intense interest in athletes, athletic development, this is a great area to get into. It's growing hugely. Certainly the area of kind of direct consumer markets is growing massively, and more so than it ever has at any other point. I do think it's probably going to come to a point in the next 5 to 10 years where almost every personal trainer will have a level 8 degree. Certainly in Ireland, people tend to be very, very highly qualified to a university degree for a lot of these coaching roles. Definitely, if you're watching this video and you want to be involved in professional sport, it's pretty much a non-negotiable at this point. Obviously, everyone will have the kind of people in their head who were former professional players, or they're hugely experienced in an area, or they might know some people in the club and they'll get work with professional sports clubs. But on a whole, if professional sports is the thing you want to get into and you want to work in, either be it a coaching environment, strength and conditioning environment, a direct sports science environment, the undergraduate degree is pretty much the base. The last thing, and to conclude on this, is that this gives you an unbelievable, you could call it a BS filter. It will give you a great ability to read scientific literature. A lot of the courses I've seen and people I've spoken to, you get a very good base level understanding of intervention design, of kind of very good logical thinking. And it is a really good place to start. I know a lot of people would be discouraged from growing into careers in sport because their parents or their peers or people around them will tell them to go into different areas. Certainly, there are easier and faster ways of making like a good living. It's definitely not one of the kind of higher paid careers. It's certainly not a flashy career to get into. Your hours are probably going to be all over the place. And just as a point on this, if you're working with athletes, full stop, your hours are going to be all over the place, right? It's not going to be a 9 to 5, whether it be that direct consumer market where you're personal training or you own a gym. Your hours are going to be around people's work days. If you're working with athletes who are working in professional sport, your hours are going to be whenever those athletes are training. So it's probably going to be early in the morning, then mid-afternoon, then later in the evening, as they get multiple sessions in throughout the day. If you're working with a national governing body, so if you were with Sport Ireland, if you were with Team GB, you're talking about multiple trips away every single year, a lot of weekends where you're out of the country. You're talking about people who'll have to relocate to a job because you have to be living on base where the athletes are. That means if the athletes go away for a month or 2 months to a warm weather training camp, you're going to be moving with them. So it's certainly not one of these kind of remote working, agile working environments if you're working with a national governing body or a pro sports team. But it can be hugely rewarding, and it's a way of getting into professional sport. For most of us, unless you're the 0.1% of humans who are genetically gifted, grew up in the correct country, worked with the right system, got given the correct opportunities, worked your ass off, had the correct mindset, and you somehow managed to become a professional athlete, unless you're in that category, or unless you're incredibly intellectually gifted and got into a direct specialist sporting role, it's very unlikely you're going to end up dealing with professional athletes on a regular basis, or dealing with highly competitive sporting environments on a regular basis. But sport and exercise science can certainly be a stepping stone to you getting there. If you have questions about this, and a lot of people watching this or a lot of people who contact us have questions about like sports science, what the options are, or starting businesses to do with sport, put them in the comments down below. We'd really appreciate your support if you could like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below. That would be absolutely phenomenal. It would really help us out. And yeah, we'll talk to you all soon.